Imagine standing at the crossroads of your life, feeling lost, betrayed, and suffocated by the world around you. Now, imagine finding a force so powerful, so transformative, that it not only frees you from the chains of your past, but reshapes every aspect of your being. This is the story of a man who, like many of us, searched for purpose in a broken world and found it in a truth so profound that it changed everything. Today I'm going to share with you the powerful reason why he accepted Islam and how you can too. From the beginning, life was not kind to him. He grew up surrounded by injustice, heartbreak, and betrayal. The system was not built for him to succeed. It was designed to push him down, to box him in, to tell him that he was less than what he truly was. Every day he saw the difference between what was preached and what was practiced. Words like freedom, justice, and equality echoed from the mouths of leaders, but they were empty sounds when he looked at the reality around him. He knew deep inside that something was wrong, that the life he had been handed was not the life he was meant to live. A fire began to grow in his heart, a restless hunger for something real, something pure, something that could not be corrupted by the lies of men. The streets could not satisfy it. Fame, money, and even rebellion could not fill the hole. He needed answers that went deeper than the surface. He needed truth that could withstand the weight of his questions. He started searching, but not in the places others would expect. He looked beyond the television, beyond the headlines, beyond the poisoned history books. He began to study, to reflect, to challenge everything he had been taught. This search was not casual. It was desperate. Every book he read, every conversation he had, every long night spent wrestling with his thoughts, it all pointed him toward a single realization. Truth was out there, but it was hidden from him on purpose. It had been buried beneath generations of oppression and fear, but he was willing to dig. He was willing to bleed for it. He was willing to tear down everything he thought he knew to find it. He had heard the promises all his life. Promises of freedom, equality, and justice. They taught it in schools. They preached it in churches. They wrote it into the laws and carved it into stone buildings. But when he looked around, he did not see freedom. He saw chains. He did not see equality. He saw segregation. He did not see justice. He saw a system that smiled in public and oppressed in private. From a young age, he realized that the American dream was not meant for everyone. It was a club with closed doors, and no matter how hard he worked, no matter how much he believed, the doors stayed locked. They told him that if he just played by the rules, success would come. But the rules were never the same for him. They changed the game every time he stepped onto the field. Everywhere he turned, the contradictions slapped him in the face. The same nation that spoke of human rights turned a blind eye to lynchings, to poverty, to the destruction of black families. The same leaders who preached morality allowed hatred to poison every institution. He could not unsee it. He could not unfeel the betrayal. Slowly, he realized that what was written on paper meant nothing without power to enforce it. He realized that words alone could not heal generations of wounds. His trust in the American system, once fragile, shattered completely. He understood that he was living in a country where freedom was a privilege, not a birthright, and that privilege was not extended to men like him. This disillusionment did not make him weaker, it made him sharper. It made him question deeper. It made him hunger for something that was real, something that could not be bought, compromised, or corrupted. When the walls of a prison cell closed around him, it seemed like the end. The streets had promised him power, but they only delivered a cage. At first, the bitterness and anger grew louder inside him. The outside world had thrown him away, labeled him another statistic, another lost cause. But what the world meant for his destruction, God used for his awakening. In the silence of that cell, the distractions of the world faded, the noise, the lies, the temptations, all of it was stripped away. What was left was a man alone with his thoughts, alone with his regrets, and most importantly, alone with his questions. It was there, in that place of isolation, that the journey inward began. He found books, and in those pages he discovered a world of ideas he had never been introduced to. He encountered the teachings of Islam, a faith that spoke of dignity, self-respect, discipline, and accountability. It was not just a religion to him, it was a map back to his true self. Islam called him to rise above the chains he had been taught to wear, to reclaim the mind that had been numbed by oppression. The more he read, the more he realized that true freedom was not something anyone could hand him. It was something he had to build inside himself. The prison guards could lock his body behind steel, but they could not cage his spirit. Once he tasted real knowledge, in that small, cold cell, a transformation began. He was no longer the product of a broken system. He was becoming a student of truth, a servant of a higher calling. Prison had not ended him. It had birthed a new version of him, one stronger, wiser, and more dangerous to the lies of the world. For a man stripped of dignity his entire life, the message of Islam hit like a thunderbolt. It did not whisper sweet lies to him. It called him to stand tall. It told him that he was not the property of any man, any government, or any system. He belonged to God alone, and in that belonging was a strength deeper than anything he had ever known. Islam taught him that self-respect was not given. It was earned through discipline, through sacrifice, through the constant struggle to master the self. It was not about how others treated him. It was about how he saw himself. He began to understand that real strength was not in muscles or in anger. It was in controlling desires, taming ego, and living by a code higher than personal gain. The discipline of prayer, fasting, and study sharpened him. It was like forging a sword in fire. Every prayer was a hammer, every fast was a flame, every moment of self-control was a blow that shaped him into something stronger. Where once there had been chaos and confusion, now there was order and clarity. Islam demanded excellence from him. It demanded that he rise above excuses, above blame, above victimhood. It did not allow him to point fingers forever. It demanded that he look in the mirror and take responsibility for his soul. That was a revolution in itself. A man who respected himself could never be truly conquered. A man who disciplined himself could never be truly enslaved. Through Islam, he was taught to walk with a sense of purpose, with pride that did not depend on the approval of others. The world had tried to convince him he was nothing. Islam reminded him he was created with greatness woven into his very being. One of the most powerful lessons he encountered through Islam was the concept of true brotherhood. For so long, he had lived in a world that divided people by the color of their skin. Racism was not just a sickness in individuals. It was stitched into the very fabric of society. Every day, he was reminded that in the eyes of the world, his skin was a barrier, a mark, a limitation. But when he learned about the teachings of Islam, he discovered something revolutionary. In the sight of God, there was no superior race, no chosen skin color, no master and no slave based on bloodlines. All human beings were equal before their Creator. The only thing that set a man apart was his character, his faith, and his actions. This was not just a theory. It was a living, breathing truth practiced by millions around the world. In Islam, he found stories of men and women from every background standing shoulder to shoulder in prayer. Kings and servants, black and white, Arab and non-Arab, united under one God, facing the same direction, praying the same prayer. It was a unity he had never seen in the world he grew up in. This realization shattered the false walls that racism had built around his mind. It proved that unity was not a dream, it was a reality that could be achieved when people submitted not to their egos, but to the one who created them all. Islam gave him a vision of humanity that was pure, just, and deeply healing. The brotherhood he discovered was not based on politics, money, or appearances. It was based on something eternal. It was a bond that no government could grant and no enemy could destroy. It was brotherhood in its truest, most sacred form. Before his encounter with true knowledge, he was living in a world shaped by ignorance, not because he lacked intelligence, but because the truth had been kept from him by design. The system preferred him blind, preferred him chasing illusions instead of questioning the ground he walked on. But when he began to read, to study, to seek knowledge with desperation and focus, something inside him broke open. Books became his window to a new world. Words unlocked chains he did not even know he was wearing. He read history, philosophy, religion, politics, and most importantly, he read about the teachings of Islam. Every page he turned was like a key unlocking a door deep within his soul. For the first time, he was able to see beyond the lies he had been fed his whole life. This was not an easy awakening. Knowledge demanded he confront painful truths. It demanded that he strip away the illusions and face the reality of his condition. but with every uncomfortable truth came a greater freedom. He realized that mental slavery was more dangerous than physical chains. A man whose mind was trapped would remain a prisoner even in an open field. Through knowledge, he began to taste spiritual freedom. He realized that he was more than the label society had placed on him. He was a creation of purpose, not accident. His mind was not a weapon against himself, but a tool for elevation. Knowledge was a form of worship, a way of honoring the gift God had given him. This awakening gave him a new identity, one rooted not in anger or victimhood, but in faith, wisdom, and vision. The more he learned, the more his soul rose above the noise of the world, preparing him for a mission far greater than he had ever imagined. He had spent much of his life bound by invisible chains, not the kind made of iron, but the kind forged by lies, fear, and systematic oppression. These chains taught him to see himself as less, to accept injustice as normal, and to doubt his own worth. They were chains placed on his mind, designed to keep him from ever realizing his true potential. Islam shattered those chains. It taught him that the first battlefield was the mind. If he could free his thoughts, if he could reclaim the way he saw himself, his creator, no force on earth could truly control him. Through the teachings of Islam, he learned that inferiority was a lie planted by those who feared his strength. He was not cursed. He was not doomed. He was not inferior by design. He was a soul crafted by the Most High, full of potential, dignity, and divine purpose. By accepting this truth, the old chains snapped one by one. The chains of self, hate, the chains of despair, the chains of powerlessness. He rose from the ashes of a broken world with a new mind, a liberated soul, and a heart set firmly on the path of true freedom. Before his transformation, life had been about survival, making it through another day, another fight, another disappointment. His world was focused on the moment with little thought for a greater purpose. But Islam opened his eyes to something far beyond personal struggle. It introduced him to the idea that life was not random, not meaningless, but part of a grand design crafted by the Creator. He came to understand that he was not born to chase approval or to simply react to injustice. He was born to serve a higher mission, a mission that demanded sacrifice, vision, and unwavering faith. Islam called him to stand as a representative of truth, to lift not just himself, but his entire people from ignorance and oppression. This mission gave him a reason to rise each morning with fire in his spirit. It gave weight to every word he spoke, every action he took. No longer was he living for survival, he was living for legacy. Every step he made was for something greater than his own name, greater than his own comfort. Through Islam, he stepped into a life where every breath, every sacrifice, and every struggle carried eternal meaning. At first, his understanding of Islam came through second-hand voices colored by politics and racial struggle. It was powerful, but it was not the full picture. It was when he stepped beyond the borders of America, when he traveled and witnessed the faith practiced across cultures and nations, that he encountered Islam in its purest form. In places like Mecca, he saw Muslims of every color and background standing as equals before God. No race, no status, no tribalism, just unity, just submission to the one who created them all. This was not a theory or a dream. It was real, lived out in front of his very eyes. Authentic Islam taught him that the divisions that ruled the world were man-made illusions. In the eyes of God, only righteousness mattered, not skin color or nationality. This shook him to his core. It expanded his mission, deepened his faith, and humbled his heart. He realized that the true power of Islam was in its ability to dissolve hate, to kill arrogance, and to build brotherhood on a foundation no man could break. His soul, once hardened by anger, softened under the weight of this truth, and his vision for change grew even larger. The man he once was no longer existed. He had been reborn. Islam had changed everything about him, not just his name, not just his external appearance, but the very core of who he was. The man who walked into Islam was angry, confused, and lost in a world of despair. The man who emerged was calm, focused, and driven by a higher purpose. Where there was once bitterness and hatred, there was now peace and strength. Where there had been resentment for the system that oppressed him, there was now a desire to heal, to uplift, to serve. Islam didn't just teach him how to live differently. It showed him how to die to the old self and rise again in the image of the Creator. This transformation wasn't just spiritual, it was mental, emotional, and physical. He became disciplined in all aspects of his life, in how he treated others, how he cared for his body, how he focused his mind. The man who once carried the weight of the world now carried the burden of truth, ready to challenge the lies that had kept his people down. In the journey of life, we often find ourselves lost, seeking answers in places that only lead to more questions. But just as this man found his purpose and power through the teachings of Islam, we too can find our true strength by seeking truth, self-respect, and unity with the divine. His transformation was not an end, but a beginning, a reminder that no matter the darkness we face, the light of faith can guide us to a life of meaning and impact.